Hello, my dear friends, tonight. Imagine you are not a king, not a knight, and not even a merchant resting beside a warm hearth. Instead, you wake slowly in a narrow street of a medieval town, the air cool and heavy with the smell of smoke, damp wood, and distant animals. The morning bell from a nearby church has only just sounded, and mist hangs low between crooked timber houses that lean toward each other as if sharing secrets. You pull your wool cloak tighter, but it does little to keep away the chill. And already you can hear movement beginning around you, carts creaking, boots stepping on packed earth, and somewhere a man coughing harshly in the cold air. This is not a peaceful place to wake, and yet your day has already begun, because you are the person people come to only when they cannot bear pain any longer. You are a medieval dentist. You do not own a grand shop. There is no clean white room, no shining chair, and no shelves of gentle medicines. Instead, you work from a small wooden stall near the market square, a place chosen not for comfort, but for visibility, because your customers rarely plan their visit. They arrive desperate. They arrive after sleepless nights. They arrive clutching their jaw with one hand and their dignity with the other. Tooth pain in the medieval world is not a small inconvenience. It is a consuming misery, and people will travel far to escape it. You set up your tools slowly as the sky grows brighter, laying them out on a simple cloth spread over a rough table. There are iron forceps, worn smooth at the handle, a narrow metal pick, a scraping knife, and a small hammer used for loosening stubborn teeth. None of them look reassuring. They are heavy, darkened by years of use, and they carry faint stains that no amount of wiping truly removes. Water is kept nearby in a bucket, but it is cold and rarely clean. There is no understanding yet of invisible illness carried by unwashed tools, and you simply rinse them as best you can before the first patient arrives. Before long, you hear hurried footsteps approaching across the square. A man comes forward holding his cheek tightly, his face pale beneath a layer of road dust. He has likely waited too long. Most people do. Medieval people fear you, but they fear the pain in their mouth even more. He does not sit comfortably. Instead, he lowers himself onto a plain wooden stool, shoulders tense, eyes watching your hands rather than your face. You speak calmly because your voice is part of the treatment. There is little else you can offer to comfort him. You examine his mouth carefully in the morning light. Teeth in this time rarely stay healthy for long. Bread is coarse, often ground with small particles of stone from mill wheels, and those tiny fragments slowly wear enamel away year after year. Honey and preserved fruits, when available, cling to teeth without cleaning. There are no toothbrushes as you would know them, only occasional rinsing or rubbing with cloth, and so decay grows quietly until one day pain begins, sharp and constant. You see the tooth immediately. Darkened near the gum and swollen around its base, it is beyond saving by the knowledge of your age. You cannot repair, you cannot fill, and you cannot soothe infection from inside the bone. Your task is simple and terrible. Remove the tooth. You prepare slowly, not because the process is gentle, but because hesitation worsens fear. The man grips the edge of the stool. Someone nearby watches with concern, perhaps a friend who helped him reach you. You offer him a strip of leather to bite, a small mercy used not to prevent pain but to prevent injury to his own tongue during the extraction. There is no true anesthesia. Occasionally a person drinks ale beforehand, and sometimes herbal mixtures dull awareness slightly. but nothing truly removes sensation. You place the iron forceps around the tooth carefully, adjusting until the grip is secure. The square around you has grown quieter now. Even those not involved tend to watch from a distance. A dental extraction in a medieval town is both feared and strangely familiar, a reminder of suffering everyone understands. With steady hands you pull, not sharply at first, but with controlled pressure, rocking the tooth gently to loosen it from the jaw. The man tenses, gripping the stool tightly. You continue patiently, knowing that haste breaks the tooth and makes the ordeal far worse. Gradually the root shifts. Then, with one final movement, the tooth comes free. The relief is immediate and visible. Pain gives way to exhaustion. You hand him cloth to press against the bleeding and advise him to avoid hard food for a short time. He nods, too tired to speak much, and leaves with slow steps, clutching his jaw but no longer trembling. This is the strange truth of your work. People leave you wounded, yet grateful. Throughout the day others come. Some are young but already suffering from rot. Some are elderly and missing half their teeth already. Occasionally a child is brought forward, frightened but unable to eat because of swelling. You treat each one with the same steady focus because although your tools are crude and your knowledge limited, your role matters deeply. Without you, infection spreads, fevers rise, and suffering continues without end. By late afternoon, your hands ache more than your patient's jaws. The repeated gripping of iron tools strains your fingers and your back grows sore from leaning over each case. You wash your hands in cold water again and again, though you do not yet know why cleanliness sometimes seems to help and sometimes does not. Experience guides you more than science. As the sun lowers, the market quiets and smoke begins to rise from cooking fires across the town. You pack your instruments slowly, wiping them and wrapping them in cloth. Another day has passed in a life most people would never choose, yet one the community depends upon. In a world without true medicine for teeth, you are both feared and needed, a figure people avoid until the moment they can no longer endure their pain. And as dusk settles over the wooden roofs and narrow lanes, you walk home through fading light, knowing that tomorrow, when the bell sounds again, someone else will wake with unbearable pain and search the town not for comfort, but for you. The next morning begins before the sun has fully risen, because pain does not wait for daylight, and neither can you. A faint blue light hangs over the town as you walk again toward the market square, boots pressing into damp earth still wet from night dew. The air smells of ash and wet straw, and a baker's oven somewhere nearby has already been lit, its warm scent drifting across the narrow street. People are waking slowly, but you know at least one person has not slept at all, for toothache is a strange misery, one that grows worse in darkness when the world is quiet and there are no distractions left to dull the mind. When you reach your stall, you do not begin by waiting. Instead, you prepare carefully because you have learned that a steady routine calms both your hands and your thoughts. You spread the same cloth across the wooden table, smoothing its creases, then lay out your instruments in familiar order. Forceps closest to your right hand, the metal pick and scraping knife beside them, and a small iron probe used for testing weak teeth. The tools are simple, but their placement matters, because hesitation in your work frightens patients more than the tools themselves. Not long after, the first visitor arrives, though this one is different from the desperate men who came yesterday. A woman approaches slowly, wrapped in a heavy wool shawl. one hand covering her mouth not only from pain but from embarrassment. In the medieval world, appearance carries meaning, and a damaged smile often brings shame. She sits quietly, eyes lowered, and you immediately understand she has endured discomfort for weeks before gathering the courage to come. You examine her carefully in the morning light, and this time you see not a single broken tooth but gums swollen and tender, along several teeth at once. The cause is common but poorly understood in your time. Food remains between teeth, hard bread crusts cut the gum line, and infection settles there slowly, creating constant soreness. You cannot treat the illness inside the body, but you attempt what you can. You take a small cloth soaked in a warm mixture of water and crushed herbs and gently clean the area, scraping away hardened deposits that have gathered at the base of the teeth. It is not painless, yet far gentler than extraction, and she sits still, trusting your steady movements. You advise her to rinse her mouth with warm, salted water when she can, a remedy learned not from written science but from long observation. Salt water does not cure the problem fully, but it eases swelling and slows decay, and sometimes that is enough to allow a person to eat again without suffering. She thanks you softly before leaving, relief already visible in her face. Not every day is filled with pulling teeth. Sometimes your work is simply to delay worse pain. As the sun climbs higher, the square becomes crowded. Merchants shout prices, animals move restlessly, and children run between stalls. Yet your corner remains a place approached cautiously. People glance toward you often, but come only when necessity pushes them forward. By midday, a young apprentice from a nearby workshop is brought by his master. The boy's cheek is swollen noticeably, and fever has begun to show in his eyes. Infection has traveled beyond the tooth into the jaw. A dangerous sign you have seen before. You know time matters now. You seat him quickly and examine the affected area. The tooth is cracked deeply, and the surrounding gum is tight and red. There is no delicate method left. You prepare your forceps again while the boy grips the stool nervously. His master stands nearby, offering reassurance he barely believes himself. You speak calmly, telling the boy to focus on breathing slowly, not because it removes pain, but because it gives his mind something steady to hold on to. You work carefully, loosening the tooth slowly rather than pulling with sudden force. The process takes longer, yet it reduces the chance of the root breaking inside the jaw, which could cause greater suffering. Finally, after steady pressure, the tooth releases. The boy gasps more from shock than from sound, and you quickly have him bite clean cloth to control the bleeding. Within minutes, his face softens slightly, and though he is weak from fever, the worst danger has begun to pass. Moments like this explain why your role exists. Without intervention, the swelling could spread to his throat or blood, and many before him have died from what began as a single damaged tooth. You cannot name the illness, but you have witnessed its pattern often enough to recognize its seriousness. The afternoon continues with smaller treatments. You scrape tartar from teeth of a merchant preparing for travel, adjust a loose tooth for an elderly man who refuses extraction yet, and provide herbal rinses to others, hoping to avoid the forceps entirely. Between patients, you clean your instruments in heated water, wiping them dry before the next use. You do not know about unseen germs, yet you notice patients fare better when tools are not left dirty, and experience becomes your quiet teacher. As daylight fades, your shoulders ache and your fingers feel stiff from gripping iron all day. The market gradually empties and the sounds of trading give way to evening voices and cooking fires. You pack your tools once more, wrapping them in cloth that smells faintly of metal and smoke. Another long day has ended, and you leave the square knowing that tomorrow someone else will wake with throbbing pain, press their hand against their cheek, and begin asking where they might find you. In a world with no gentle dentistry, no numbness, and no quick relief, your life remains one of endurance, steady hands, and quiet responsibility, walking home at dusk as the church bell rings and the town settles into night. Another day passes into evening, and the town settles beneath a dim orange glow from scattered hearth fires. Yet your work does not always end with sunset. In the medieval world, people often wait too long before seeking help, and when pain becomes unbearable, they will come for you at any hour. Tonight, as you sit inside your modest home, you hear hurried knocking at your door, urgent and uneven. You already understand the reason before opening it. Outside stands a farmer and his older brother supporting him. The man's face is pale and drawn, and his jaw is swollen so greatly that his speech comes out thick and slow. He has traveled in darkness because he could not wait until morning. Tooth pain has a way of overwhelming fear, and now desperation has brought him to you. You gather your tools quickly, wrapping them into a cloth bundle and carrying a lantern into the night. The road is uneven and muddy, and the small flame inside the lantern flickers with each step. When you arrive at the farmer's cottage, the interior is dim, lit only by a small hearth. You seat him near the fire where light is strongest, and you begin your examination. The swelling is severe, and heat radiates from his cheek even before you touch it. Infection has grown beneath the tooth, creating pressure deep inside the jaw. This is among the most dangerous conditions you face, not because the extraction itself is difficult, but because the illness has already spread. You must act quickly but steadily. You ask him to drink a small cup of ale first. It will not remove pain, but it will steady his nerves and allow his muscles to relax slightly. Then you open your tools and position yourself carefully. There is little room to work in the cramped cottage, and the firelight shifts constantly, casting shadows across your hands. You take a slow breath to steady yourself, for calm hands matter more than strong hands in moments like this. You grip the tooth with your forceps and begin the familiar process of loosening it. The man groans softly, gripping the edge of the wooden table beside him, while his brother stands nearby, speaking quietly to distract him. You do not rush. Sudden force can break the crown and leave the root trapped inside, and in this condition that could prove fatal. Instead, you rock the tooth gently again and again, patient and controlled. After a long moment, the root finally gives way and the tooth comes free. You immediately instruct him to bite cloth firmly while you clean the area as best you can. Blood flows, but this is expected. What matters is that pressure within the jaw is relieved. Within minutes, his breathing slows, and though exhaustion overtakes him, relief begins replacing agony. You advise them to keep the area clean and rinse with warm salted water whenever possible. Whether they fully follow this advice you cannot know, but you have done what your knowledge allows. In your world, success is not perfect healing, but preventing death from infection. You pack your tools again, now stained and warm from use, and step back into the cold night air. Walking home beneath the dark sky, you realize this part of your life few people consider. You are not only a market worker, but also a traveling healer, called when suffering refuses to wait for daylight. Many professions in your time sleep at night, but yours does not always grant that comfort. The next morning arrives quickly despite little rest. You return once more to the square and the familiar rhythm continues. A merchant requests removal of a loose molar before a journey, fearing it may worsen on the road. A soldier home from service presents a broken tooth cracked during training. Each case demands attention, and you offer the same careful work each time, knowing that while you cannot promise comfort, you can promise effort and steadiness. Children gather nearby, sometimes curious yet cautious. They watch from a distance, fascinated by your instruments but unwilling to come close. To them you are a figure both helpful and frightening, a person whose presence means someone nearby is suffering. You do not resent this reputation. In truth, you understand it. By late afternoon, the sky dims again, and the square begins to empty. You clean your tools thoroughly in heated water, wiping each one slowly before storing it. Your hands are sore, and small calluses have formed from years of gripping iron handles. These marks are signs of your trade, not visible like a blacksmith's burns, but just as permanent. You leave the square once more at dusk, tired yet aware that tomorrow will bring the same pattern. In a time without gentle dentistry, your life remains a cycle of patience, resilience, and responsibility. People fear your work, yet they seek you when pain becomes unbearable. And though your methods are harsh by future standards, to your neighbors you are the difference between endless suffering and the possibility of relief. The weeks pass, and you begin to notice something that few outside your trade ever understand. Tooth pain in the medieval world is not rare, it is constant. It moves quietly through the town like a hidden illness, striking the rich and poor alike. Bread is the foundation of nearly every meal, ground from grain that carries fine grit from millstones, and that grit slowly grinds away enamel year after year. Meat, when eaten, is tough and often dried. Vegetables are coarse. Sweetness, when available, clings stubbornly to teeth without ever being properly cleaned away. In such a world, decay is not surprising. It is almost expected. Yet you do not think of yourself as a scholar or a man of science. You are a craftsman of necessity. Knowledge comes not from books, but from repetition. You have learned, through long observation, which teeth tend to fail first. The back molars, worn by grinding heavy bread, often darken and split. The front teeth chip from accidents or fights. Gums swell when winter diets grow poor and fresh greens become rare. These patterns become your quiet education. On a cold morning in early winter, the square feels harsher than usual. Wind cuts through wool cloaks and pushes smoke from cooking fires low across the street. You wrap your own cloak tightly, but keep your hands uncovered, because gloved fingers cannot grip tools with precision. Already you see fewer merchants in the market. Trade slows when weather turns severe, but pain does not. A well-dressed man approaches your stall, unusual in both posture and clothing. He wears a heavy cloak lined with fur and carries himself carefully, clearly unused to public suffering. When he sits, you notice he avoids opening his mouth fully, as though embarrassed. Wealth does not protect teeth from decay, but it often adds pride to the problem. Upon examination, you find a tooth only partially damaged. In another time, perhaps it could be repaired. In yours, it must be scraped clean and smoothed as much as possible to delay extraction. You take your metal pick and gently remove visible rot, careful not to press too deeply into the sensitive core. He winces but does not cry out. His pride holds firm even as discomfort grows. You advise him to rinse frequently and return if swelling begins. Whether he listens is uncertain. Some believe tooth pain is punishment or imbalance in the body's humors, and they seek physicians for herbs and bleeding before they ever seek you. Others turn first to charm sellers or prayer. By the time many come to you, the tooth is beyond saving. The day grows busier despite the cold. A young woman arrives with a cracked front tooth damaged while chewing a hard nut. It troubles her not only because of pain, but because it alters her appearance. In medieval society, visible flaws can carry social weight. You attempt to smooth the broken edge carefully, using a small file to reduce sharpness and prevent further splitting. It is delicate work, far less dramatic than extraction, yet equally important for her comfort. By midday, your fingers are numb from cold metal and winter air. You warm them briefly over a small brazier kept near your stall, careful not to overheat the instruments. The brazier provides some comfort to patients as well, its warmth a small distraction from fear. Then comes a case you dread, a child no older than 7, brought forward by a worried mother. The boy's cheek is swollen, and tears streak across dirt-smudged skin. Children struggle more with fear than adults, and their small mouths make extraction more difficult. You kneel to meet his eyes at level height and speak softly, explaining in simple words what must be done. He clutches his mother's hand tightly. You work with extra care, steady and patient. The tooth is small but stubborn. You must avoid sudden movements that could frighten him into jerking away. At last, the tooth loosens and comes free. The boy cries briefly, but the worst has ended. His mother thanks you with visible relief, pressing a small coin into your hand despite her modest clothing. Moments like this weigh heavily on you, because you know how frightening your presence must seem to a child. As evening approaches, snow begins to fall lightly, soft flakes settling on rooftops and market stalls. The square grows quieter, and most people hurry home before darkness deepens. You remain until the last possible moment, because someone may yet arrive in pain. Eventually you wrap your tools and close your stall, snow collecting along your shoulders as you walk home. Inside your dwelling, you sit near your own hearth, staring briefly at the iron forceps resting on the table beside you. You wonder how long your hands will remain steady enough for this work. It demands strength, patience, and a tolerance for suffering few others possess. Yet tomorrow, when the bell rings again and the market stirs, you will return to your stall. Because in a world without modern medicine, without gentle anesthetic or careful restoration, being a medieval dentist means carrying both the fear and the hope of your town in your iron tools, enduring long days of cold, blood, and responsibility, so others may sleep without throbbing pain. Winter settles more firmly over the town, and with it comes a different kind of suffering. Cold weather does not create tooth problems, but it reveals them. The icy air makes sensitive teeth ache sharply, and people who once ignored small discomfort now find themselves unable to drink water or chew even soft bread without pain spreading through their jaw and into their head. For you, winter becomes the busiest season. You arrive at the market square before sunrise, the sky still dark blue and the ground stiff with frost. Your breath rises in pale clouds as you set out your stall. Even the iron tools feel colder than usual, and you warm them slightly near a small brazier, not for comfort, but because frozen metal against a patient's mouth shocks them into panic. You have learned this through experience rather than teaching. The first visitor comes almost immediately, a baker who has not slept all night. He presses both hands against his face and struggles even to speak. He depends on his teeth for his livelihood, tasting dough and testing crusts. Yet his mouth now punishes him for every attempt to work. You examine him and find a large molar split nearly in two, likely cracked by biting a hard seed or stone fragment hidden in flour. It cannot be saved. You ask him to sit and lean his head against the wall behind him for support. A man in pain moves suddenly without meaning to, and you must keep his head steady. He nods weakly, trusting your guidance because he has no other option. You wrap your fingers firmly around the forceps and position them carefully at the base of the tooth. The baker grips the bench so tightly his knuckles pale. The extraction takes longer than expected. The broken edges make gripping difficult and you adjust repeatedly to keep hold. You apply pressure slowly, rocking the tooth from side to side, patient and controlled. The square around you grows quiet again, not from command but from shared understanding. Everyone nearby knows the sound and tension of this moment. Finally, the root loosens and the tooth releases. The baker exhales sharply and nearly collapses with relief. Sweat has formed across his brow despite the cold air. You hand him cloth to bite and instruct him to rest before returning to work. He thanks you repeatedly, voice weak but grateful, and you watch him walk away slower but steadier than when he arrived. As the morning continues, you treat many similar cases. Winter diets lack fresh greens and gums grow tender and bleed easily. You clean them carefully with cloth and warm herbal rinses made from sage and thyme when available. These remedies are not cures, yet they comfort enough to help people eat and sleep. Midday brings a different visitor, a traveling soldier resting in town. He approaches confidently at first but quickly reveals his problem. A tooth knocked loose during training. Unlike rot, this injury is sudden. You examine it and know the tooth will not hold long. Rather than wait for infection, you recommend removing it now. He agrees without hesitation, accustomed to pain from other injuries. Even so, when the forceps grip the tooth and pressure begins, his expression tightens and his shoulders tense. No one truly ignores this pain, no matter how brave. The extraction is quick and he laughs afterward more from relief than humor. He leaves offering you a coin and a respectful nod, acknowledging your work as one craftsman to another. The afternoon slows briefly, allowing you to clean your instruments in heated water. You scrub them with cloth carefully, though you do not fully know why cleaner tools seem to lead to fewer fevers. You only know they do. Your knowledge grows through observation, not theory, and you trust what you have seen repeatedly. As dusk nears, an elderly woman arrives, supported by her granddaughter. She has lost many teeth already, and the remaining ones trouble her constantly. She does not wish extraction, fearing she will no longer chew bread at all. Instead, you gently smooth sharp edges and clean her gums, giving advice on soaking bread in broth to soften it before eating. She smiles faintly afterward, a simple expression that reminds you your work is not always force and iron. Sometimes it is patience and small comfort. Night falls early in winter and you pack your tools with tired hands. Snow begins again, drifting quietly across the emptying square. You walk home beneath the dim light of the moon, carrying the weight of the day not only in sore muscles but in memory. Every face, every cry, every relief stays with you longer than the sound fades. Being a medieval dentist is not a trade chosen for ease. It is a duty shaped by necessity, lived in cold mornings and long evenings, where fear greets you daily, yet gratitude follows behind it. Tomorrow will bring more pain to your door, and once again, you will open your stall, lift your iron tools, and help strangers endure what they cannot bear alone. Winter deepens, and with it the town grows quieter after sunset. Yet your responsibilities do not lessen. In fact, the colder months bring a different challenge. People delay treatment longer. Travel becomes difficult. Roads turn muddy or frozen, and many choose to endure discomfort at home rather than walk through biting wind. By the time they finally appear at your stall, their condition is often far worse than it might have been weeks earlier. One gray morning, a blacksmith arrives, a man known for strength and patience, yet today he struggles even to speak. His jaw is stiff, and he opens his mouth only slightly. You recognize this immediately as dangerous swelling beneath a tooth. The infection has traveled deep into the gum and begun tightening the muscles of his jaw, making movement painful. He has waited too long. Not from fear, but from stubborn endurance. You seat him carefully and warm a cloth near your brazier before pressing it gently against the side of his face. The heat eases tension slightly and allows you to examine the tooth more fully. The gum around it is swollen and stretched, and you know removal cannot be delayed. The blacksmith nods, understanding without many words. You begin the extraction slowly, more cautious than usual. In such cases, sudden force risks cracking the jawbone itself. You rock the tooth patiently, pausing often to allow him to breathe. Sweat forms along his temples despite the cold air. The square is nearly silent again, passers-by instinctively giving distance. After careful effort, the tooth finally loosens and comes free. Blood follows, but so does visible relief as pressure inside the jaw decreases. You instruct him to rinse frequently and rest near warmth, warning him not to return to heavy work immediately. He thanks you with a firm handshake, his large hands dwarfing yours, and leaves moving slower but calmer. Encounters like this remind you that your work, though feared, prevents greater tragedy. Without removal, such infections can spread to throat or chest, and many have been lost that way. Later that same day, a very different visitor approaches, a traveling barber. Barbers in your time perform many tasks beyond cutting hair. Some bleed patients with small blades to balance bodily humors. Others pull teeth in villages lacking a specialist. He greets you with respect, curious about your instruments and methods. You exchange knowledge quietly, comparing techniques and sharing observations. He explains how he uses simple pincers during fairs, working quickly before crowds, while you describe your slower approach to prevent roots breaking. Neither of you has written training, yet both of you gather understanding through repeated practice. The conversation comforts you in a strange way. Your work is solitary most days, and meeting another who understands the difficulty lightens the burden. When he leaves, you return to your stall with renewed steadiness. As afternoon progresses, you see more cases of worn teeth rather than broken ones. Years of coarse food have flattened chewing surfaces, exposing sensitive inner layers. You scrape away rough edges and apply herbal mixtures meant to soothe discomfort, though their effect is limited. Still, even small relief matters greatly in a time without lasting medicine. The sun sets early again, and cold shadows stretch across the square. You continue working until the last visitor leaves, because turning someone away in pain weighs heavily on your conscience. Only when darkness fully settles do you wrap your tools in cloth and extinguish the brazier. Walking home, you pass houses glowing softly with candlelight. Families gather inside, sharing meals and stories, while you carry the quiet fatigue of a day spent easing suffering. You understand that few envy your profession, yet many depend upon it. The medieval world has no gentle dentistry, no prevention beyond simple rinses and careful chewing, and so your role remains necessary. When you finally sit beside your hearth warming your hands after long hours gripping cold iron, you know tomorrow will bring the same steady pattern. More faces drawn with pain, more cautious examinations, and more moments where patience must replace comfort. Being a medieval dentist means living between fear and gratitude, walking each day into a task few would willingly choose, yet one the entire town silently relies upon. As winter slowly begins to soften and the first hints of spring approach, the town changes again. The snow melts into damp earth, and the streets become muddy pathways lined with puddles reflecting pale sunlight. People return outdoors more often, markets grow louder, and travel resumes. For most trades, this is a relief, but for you it means something else entirely. More strangers, more journeys, and more pain arriving at your stall. Travelers bring different diets and different injuries. One morning, a merchant caravan stops briefly outside the town, and before long, two of them are guided toward you. Long journeys on rough roads make small problems unbearable. The first man complains of constant throbbing, worsened by the shaking of carts. You examine him and discover a tooth worn nearly to its root. Years of chewing dried meat and hard grain have hollowed it from inside. He admits he has tried everything: clove oil, wine, and even pressing hot stones to his cheek, none offering lasting relief. You prepare your tools again, knowing travel will resume soon and he cannot continue in this condition. The man sits stiffly, his companions watching anxiously. You work steadily, gripping the weakened tooth and rocking it slowly, careful not to leave fragments behind. The final movement frees it, and the relief on his face is immediate, though exhaustion follows just as quickly. He thanks you with a small coin and hurried gratitude, eager to return to his caravan before departure. Not long after, a young boy from a farming family approaches, guided by his father. The child does not yet understand why he is here and watches your hands closely. His tooth has loosened naturally, but refuses to fall free, causing pain whenever he eats. This case is gentler. You reassure him, showing him the tool before using it so he knows what will happen. With a quick, controlled motion, the tooth is removed. He looks surprised more than frightened, then smiles shyly when you show him the small tooth in your palm. Sometimes your work brings fear, sometimes it brings simple relief. By midday, the square is filled with activity. Animals move through the streets, traders argue prices, and bells ring from the church tower. Yet your corner always holds a small, quiet space around it, as though people instinctively lower their voices nearby. The presence of your tools reminds them of shared vulnerability. Everyone knows they may one day need your help. Later in the afternoon, a woman arrives suffering not from decay, but from a swelling beneath the gum itself. You gently lance the area with a fine blade to release trapped pressure, then clean it with a warm herbal rinse. It is delicate work requiring patience rather than strength. She leaves calmer than she arrived, walking slowly but without clutching her face. As the day lengthens, sunlight grows warmer, and for the first time in months you remove your heavier cloak while working. yet your hands remain sore from constant gripping, and small cuts from metal edges sting under repeated washing. The trade wears on you quietly, not in dramatic injuries, but in steady fatigue carried every evening. Toward sunset, a group of children passes your stall laughing, then quickly falls silent as they notice your instruments. They whisper among themselves and hurry away. You do not blame them. To them, you are not a villain, but a reminder that pain exists in a world where most days are simple. When the market closes and the crowd disperses, you sit a moment longer than usual before packing your tools. The warmer air carries the scent of damp soil and new growth. You realize your profession changes with seasons, yet never truly becomes easier. Spring brings movement and accidents. Summer brings travel and broken teeth. Autumn brings harvest injuries, and winter brings infection and swelling. You wrap your instruments carefully and begin the walk home through streets glowing in golden evening light. Another day has passed, and though few would choose your life, your steady work allows others to eat, speak, and sleep again. In a time without gentle care, your iron tools and patient hands remain one of the few defenses against a small pain that can grow into great suffering. Spring settles fully over the town, and with it comes longer days and heavier work. Fields outside the walls grow busy again, farmers bending over soil from morning until sunset. Hard labor changes the kind of problems you see. Instead of slow decay alone, accidents begin to appear. A slipped tool, a fall from a cart, a bite into an unexpected stone hidden in grain. Each one eventually brings someone to your stall. One afternoon, a young farmhand is led toward you by two companions. His lip is cut and his front tooth has been pushed sideways, not broken but displaced from its place. He speaks in short breaths, frightened more by the sight of it than the pain itself. You guide him to sit and study the tooth carefully. Removing it entirely would leave him unable to bite cleanly for the rest of his life, so you attempt something more delicate. You press gently along the gum, steadying the tooth and guiding it slowly back into alignment. The work requires patience and a calm voice, because he must remain still. He grips the edge of the bench but does not pull away. When the tooth settles back into position, you wrap cloth around it to hold it steady and instruct him to eat only soft food for several days. Whether it will remain firm you cannot promise, but you have given him a chance. He thanks you with relief clear in his eyes. Your role often becomes more than simple extraction. People begin to trust your judgment. You have seen patterns others have not, and even though you cannot name the reasons, experience shapes your decisions. You know which teeth can wait and which cannot. You know when swelling is dangerous and when it will pass. As days grow warmer, you notice more cases of worn enamel from constant chewing of dried grain cakes carried into fields. Laborers eat quickly while working, rarely rinsing their mouths afterward. You advise them to wash with water when possible, though many shrug, more focused on the day's work than long-term comfort. You understand this. Survival often outranks prevention. By midday, the market is crowded and loud again. Traders shout, horses stomp, and the smell of cooking stews drifts through the air. Yet around your stall, people still approach carefully. A man waits nearly an hour before stepping forward, unable to hide the swelling along his jaw any longer. You examine him and find an abscess deep near the gum. Extraction alone will not release pressure quickly enough, so you carefully open the swollen area with a small blade. He grips the stool tightly but remains still, trusting you despite fear. When the pressure releases, his shoulders lower visibly and his breathing steadies. You clean the area and instruct him on rinsing with warm salt water repeatedly over the coming days. You have seen enough cases to know this helps prevent fever, though you do not know why. Knowledge in your world grows through memory rather than writing. The afternoon passes in steady rhythm. A merchant with a loose molar, a shepherd with a chipped tooth from biting bone, an elderly man seeking relief from sore gums. Each one receives attention. Your hands move almost automatically now, guided by habit and care. You no longer think of the tools as frightening objects. They are simply part of daily life, as familiar to you as a baker's oven or a carpenter's hammer. As evening approaches, you sit briefly and flex your fingers, feeling stiffness settle into your joints. This work demands strength but also fine control, and you wonder how many more years your hands will obey you so precisely. A dentist in your time cannot retire easily. As long as people suffer, they will come searching for you. The sun lowers slowly, painting the rooftops in soft gold. You clean your instruments carefully in warm water and wrap them in cloth once more. Around you the market closes, carts roll away, and laughter returns to the square. People walk home to meals and rest, while you carry the quiet knowledge of how much hidden pain exists behind ordinary faces. You begin the walk home through gentle evening light, hearing distant church bells echo through the streets. Tomorrow the same routine will begin again, another line of worried faces, another day of patience and endurance. In a world without relief for tooth pain beyond your skill, your work never truly ends. And though many fear your tools, they also depend upon your steady presence more than they realize. Summer arrives gradually, bringing warmth and longer hours of light, and with it comes a different rhythm to the town. People rise earlier, work longer, and eat outdoors more often. The market becomes crowded almost from dawn until dusk, and the streets fill with travelers, farmers, and children running between stalls. For many trades, this is a welcome season, but for you it becomes the busiest time of all, because more activity brings more accidents and more neglect of small pains that grow worse under the heat. You set up your stall beneath a simple cloth canopy to shield your tools from direct sunlight. Iron grows hot quickly, and placing heated metal into a patient's mouth startles them badly. You have learned to keep a bucket of cool water nearby, dipping the forceps briefly before each use. The practice is not taught by any master, only discovered after years of experience calming frightened visitors. Before the morning is halfway through, a shepherd approaches, leading a small boy who walks with careful steps. The child has fallen while climbing a fence and struck his mouth. Blood has dried along his lip, and one of his front teeth hangs loose. The boy looks more shocked than injured, unsure whether to cry or remain brave. You kneel before him and speak softly, explaining what you must do so he understands each movement. You hold the tooth gently and remove it with a quick motion. The boy startles but does not cry, and when you show him the small tooth in your palm, curiosity replaces fear. His father thanks you warmly and promises to bring you fresh cheese in trade. Not all payment comes as coin. In your profession, gratitude often arrives in the form of food or simple goods, and you accept these because your role serves the entire community. As the sun climbs higher, the heat becomes heavy. Flies gather around food stalls, and you wave them away from your instruments constantly. Cleanliness is difficult in such conditions. You rinse your tools more frequently, wiping them dry again and again, though you cannot completely prevent dust and air from touching them. You only know that patients heal better when you try. By midday, a woman arrives suffering from sharp pain whenever she drinks cold water. You inspect her teeth and find a worn surface exposing sensitive inner layers. Instead of removing it, you smooth the rough edge carefully with a small file, then apply a mixture of crushed herbs meant to dull sensation. It does not cure the problem, but she smiles faintly afterward, able to close her mouth without flinching. Later, a traveling laborer presents a broken molar from biting a small stone hidden in dried grain. These cases are common during harvest season, when milling becomes hurried. You secure the forceps firmly and begin the slow rocking motion you have practiced countless times. The man grips a strip of leather between his teeth, shoulders tense, and you maintain steady pressure. After careful effort, the tooth releases cleanly. He exhales deeply, relief overtaking him faster than exhaustion. Throughout the afternoon, the same pattern repeats. One by one, people come forward, some embarrassed, some fearful, all hoping to leave without the pain that brought them. You notice how often they thank you afterward, even though your methods are harsh. Relief in this age matters more than comfort. The heat continues into evening. Your hands ache and small blisters form beneath your fingers from gripping iron handles all day. You rinse them in cool water and sit briefly before packing your stall. Around you, the market slowly quiets, replaced by laughter and conversation as people gather for supper. You walk home beneath a sky still glowing with late sunlight, tired but aware that tomorrow will be no lighter. In a time without gentle care, you carry a responsibility few see clearly. People fear the moment they must sit before you, yet they also know you offer the only path back to normal life. Being a medieval dentist means standing between daily suffering and simple relief, enduring heat, fatigue, and worry, so others may eat and sleep again without agony. Late summer brings harvest, and with harvest comes harder food and longer hours for everyone in the town. Fields outside the walls fill with workers cutting grain from sunrise until evening, and meals become quick and practical rather than careful. People eat while standing, chew while walking, and swallow without rest. And in such habits, small injuries become common. For you, this season means not only decay, but sudden damage. You open your stall early one morning to the distant sound of scythes moving through wheat and carts already rumbling toward the market. Dust hangs in the warm air, and your table soon gathers a thin layer of it no matter how often you wipe it clean. You arrange your instruments in their usual order, forceps, picks, and the small scraping blade, then wait only a short time before your first visitor appears. A mill worker approaches holding his mouth slightly open. He explains that while tasting newly ground flour, he bit down on a hard fragment of stone carried from the grinding wheel. The impact split a tooth sharply, and now each breath of air causes stabbing pain. You examine him carefully and find the crack deep enough to reach the sensitive center. There is no treatment except removal. You position him on the stool, steadying his head against the wooden post behind him so sudden movement will not interrupt your grip. He breathes quickly, trying to prepare himself, and you offer him the leather strip again. Around you, nearby merchants glance over but pretend not to watch, each one aware they may someday sit where he sits now. The tooth is stubborn. Broken edges make the forceps slip once, and you pause to adjust your hold. You work slowly, rocking the root back and forth, waiting for it to loosen rather than forcing it. After careful pressure, it finally releases, and the worker exhales heavily, shoulders sagging as relief replaces fear. He thanks you repeatedly, promising flour in payment once the harvest is stored. As the day continues, more farmers arrive. Hard bread crusts and unwashed fruit have worn their teeth down. Some only need cleaning and smoothing. Others require extraction. You move from one patient to another with steady patience, your hands almost working on memory alone. Each case is different, yet the rhythm becomes familiar. Examine, steady, loosen, remove, comfort. In the afternoon, a woman arrives with her elderly father. He has nearly no teeth left and cannot chew without pain from his remaining gums. You clean the irritated areas gently and suggest soaking food in broth before eating. He nods slowly, grateful for any advice that allows him to continue sharing meals with his family. Not every treatment in your work involves iron force. Sometimes it is simply guidance born from observation. The heat of the day lingers into evening. Sweat dries across your brow and your fingers ache from constant gripping. You rinse your tools again in warm water heated by the small brazier, wiping them carefully before placing them back upon the cloth. You have noticed over the years that patients heal better when your tools are clean, even if you cannot explain why. Experience teaches what books have not yet written. As the sun lowers behind the rooftops, shadows stretch across the square and voices soften. You treat one final visitor, a boy whose loose tooth has caused him days of discomfort. A quick removal and a reassuring word send him home smiling, proudly carrying the tooth in his hand as if it were treasure rather than trouble. At last you pack your instruments, wrapping them in cloth that smells faintly of metal and smoke. The market empties, leaving only distant footsteps in the echo of evening bells. You begin the walk home slowly, feeling the weight of fatigue in your shoulders. Being a medieval dentist is not dramatic heroism, but quiet endurance. Long days of standing, steady hands guiding iron tools, and constant responsibility for relieving a pain no one else in the town knows how to ease. Tomorrow, as always, someone will wake with aching teeth and seek your stall again, and you will return to your place in the square, ready to meet them. Autumn begins to settle over the town, and the air changes from warm to cool almost overnight. Leaves gather along the edges of the streets, and smoke rises from chimneys earlier each evening. With the harvest stored and work slowing in the fields, people finally have time to notice discomfort they ignored all summer. For you, this season does not bring rest. It brings the patients who waited too long. You open your stall beneath a pale morning sky and immediately recognize the pattern. Faces approach not with small complaints, but with deep exhaustion. Many have endured pain for weeks while working in the fields, hoping it would fade once the harvest ended. Instead, the quiet days of autumn make the throbbing more noticeable, and sleep becomes difficult. A weaver arrives first, a woman whose hands tremble slightly as she sits. She explains she has not slept properly for 3 nights because a constant ache spreads from her jaw into her ear. You examine her mouth and see swelling around a molar hidden far back, difficult to reach. These cases are the hardest, not because they cannot be treated, but because they require patience and precision. You adjust your position, ask her to tilt her head toward the light and slowly work the forceps into place. The extraction is long. You pause often to allow her to breathe and steady herself. The square remains respectfully quiet around you as people pass without staring. At last the tooth loosens and comes free, and she lowers her shoulders as though a heavy weight has been lifted. She presses a cloth to her mouth and whispers her thanks before leaving carefully, already calmer than when she arrived. By midday, a steady line forms again. An elderly carpenter comes next, his teeth worn flat from years of holding nails between them while working. One tooth has fractured at the root and now causes sharp stabs of pain when he speaks. You remove it carefully, then smooth a neighboring tooth to prevent similar trouble. He laughs softly afterward, relieved he can return to conversation without wincing. The afternoon brings colder wind. You wrap your cloak tighter but keep working, fingers stiffening from chill. Holding the forceps requires strength, and you flex your hands between visitors to keep them steady. A merchant notices and offers you warm cider and thanks for past treatment. You accept gratefully, warming your hands around the cup before returning to your tools. Later, a young mother brings her daughter, who hides behind her cloak. The girl has a loose tooth that frightens her more than it hurts. You kneel to her height and explain gently what will happen. With one careful movement, the tooth is removed, and the child stares at it in wonder. She smiles, fear gone as quickly as it came, and leaves holding her mother's hand more confidently. As evening approaches, the wind grows sharper and the market empties earlier. You treat your final visitor, a shepherd with swollen gums from constant chewing of coarse bread and salted meat. You clean the inflamed areas and advise warm rinses before sleep. He nods, relieved to have guidance rather than iron this time. You clean your instrument slowly as dusk settles. The water steams faintly in the cooling air while you wipe each tool dry and wrap it carefully. The square becomes quiet again, footsteps fading into narrow streets lit by candlelight. Walking home beneath a darkening sky, you feel the familiar heaviness in your arms and shoulders. Your work has no festival, no applause, and little recognition beyond quiet thanks. Yet every day you lessen suffering that would otherwise linger. Being a medieval dentist means meeting pain directly, season after season, offering steady hands in a world where few remedies exist, and returning each morning knowing someone waits for relief you alone can provide. The days grow shorter, and autumn deepens into early winter once again. Frost forms along rooftops at dawn, and the market square wakes slowly beneath a pale gray sky. For most townspeople, this season means warmth indoors and less travel. But for you it means a quieter, heavier kind of work. People now come not for sudden accidents, but for long neglected pain that cold air has awakened. You arrive early and light the small brazier beside your table. The faint heat is not comfort alone. It keeps your fingers from stiffening and allows you to hold the instrument steadily. Without warmth, your hands tremble slightly, and trembling hands cannot be trusted near a patient's mouth. You warm your fingers over the coals, then unwrap your tools carefully, placing each one where habit expects it. Before long, an elderly man approaches, wrapped tightly in a wool cloak. He walks slowly and speaks even slower, not from weakness, but from caution, because moving his jaw hurts him. He has endured months of discomfort, hoping it would fade, but winter air now makes every breath sting sharply. You examine him and find a deep cavity hidden near the gum line. The surrounding tissue is swollen and sensitive. You prepare for removal but take extra care. For older patients, heal more slowly. You steady his head and work gently, easing the tooth back and forth rather than forcing it. He grips the edge of the stool but remains still, trusting your patience. After careful effort, the tooth releases and he exhales softly, relief spreading across his face more than words can express. He thanks you and leaves walking lighter than when he arrived. As the morning continues, the cold air keeps the crowd small. Yet nearly everyone who comes suffers deeply. One woman arrives unable to close her mouth fully because swelling has stiffened her jaw. You warm a cloth and press it to her cheek first, allowing muscles to relax before treatment. Only then do you begin your work, slowly releasing the infected tooth. When finished, she rests a moment beside your stall, breathing calmly, for the first time in days. The wind grows sharper by afternoon. You notice your hands reddening from cold despite the brazier's warmth. You pause between patients to rub them together and regain feeling before gripping the iron handles again. Each movement requires control. One slip could break a tooth and leave fragments behind, causing greater suffering later. A boy arrives next with his father, complaining of pain when eating dried apples stored for winter. The fruit's hardness has loosened a tooth not yet ready to fall. This case is gentle, and you remove it quickly, handing the tooth to him as proof the trouble is gone. He smiles shyly and thanks you, more relieved than frightened. Throughout the day you continue steadily. Some require extraction, others only cleaning or advice. You suggest warm saltwater rinses often, because you have seen swelling lessen afterward even though you do not know the reason. Experience guides you more than theory. As evening approaches, snow begins to fall lightly across the square. Fewer footsteps pass now, and the sounds of the town soften beneath the white layer forming along the ground. You treat your final visitor, a woman whose gums ache from years of chewing coarse bread. Gentle cleaning and soothing herbs give her comfort enough to sleep. You clean your instruments carefully in warmed water and dry them by the brazier before wrapping them in cloth. The snow continues falling as you pack your stall. Around you, the market closes early, and lanterns glow along narrow streets. Walking home through the quiet snowfall, you feel the steady fatigue of the day, yet also the calm knowledge that many tonight will sleep because of your work. Being a medieval dentist means facing pain others cannot bear, offering relief with simple tools and practiced patience, and returning each morning to a task that never truly ends but always matters. Deep winter now settles completely over the town. Snow lies thick along the rooftops, and the streets are quieter than any other time of year. Most trades slow almost to stillness, yet your work does not disappear. Instead, it changes. People travel less, which means those who come to you are the ones who truly cannot endure the pain any longer. They arrive wrapped in cloaks, faces pale from sleepless nights. Seeking relief they delayed as long as possible. You begin your morning before sunrise, walking through narrow streets where only a few lanterns burn. The cold air stings your lungs and frost crunches beneath your boots. When you reach the square, you clear snow from the small space where your stall stands. Even this simple task reminds you that your trade requires persistence before the first patient even appears. You light the brazier carefully and warm your hands. The metal tools feel painfully cold at first touch, and you know placing them directly into a patient's mouth without warming would cause panic. So you hold each instrument near the gentle heat until it loses its bite of winter. The first visitor comes slowly across the square, a baker whose work requires tasting dough and crust throughout the day. He confesses he has not eaten properly for 2 days, because every bite sends sharp pain through his jaw. You examine him and find a tooth cracked along the side, likely from biting a hard seed hidden in grain. The gum around it has begun swelling, and waiting longer would only worsen it. You seat him and steady his head. The cold makes people tense easily, and you speak calmly so he relaxes enough for you to work. You grip the tooth carefully and begin the familiar rocking motion. Your hands must remain steady despite numb fingers, and you pause once to warm them again before continuing. At last the tooth loosens and releases. The baker breathes out deeply, relief almost visible in the air between you. He thanks you and promises fresh bread once he can eat again. As the morning progresses, more townspeople gather, though never in crowds. Each person who comes now carries real suffering. A tailor arrives unable to sew because pain distracts him constantly. A stable worker struggles to chew meat during winter meals. You treat them one by one, moving slowly but carefully, never rushing because haste risks breaking roots inside the jaw. By midday, snow begins falling again, soft and steady. Few people pass through the square now. The quiet around your stall becomes almost peaceful, broken only by the sound of your tools and quiet conversation. An elderly woman arrives supported by her son, complaining not of a single tooth but of sore gums throughout her mouth. Years of wear have left them tender and inflamed. You clean them gently and apply soothing herbs. She thanks you softly, relieved to leave without an extraction this time. The afternoon brings your most difficult case of the day. A young man arrives with swelling beneath his jaw and fever in his eyes. The infection has spread from a decayed tooth and threatens to grow worse. You work with great care, removing the tooth slowly to release the pressure. When it finally comes free, he nearly collapses from exhaustion, yet relief follows quickly. You instruct him to rest near warmth and rinse often, hoping the fever will fade. As evening approaches, the sky darkens early. Snow muffles the sounds of the town and only a few footsteps cross the square. You treat one last patient, a child frightened by a loose tooth that aches in the cold. A quick, gentle removal turns fear into curiosity. As he examines the tiny tooth in his mittened hand, you clean your instruments beside the brazier, drying them thoroughly so moisture will not freeze upon them overnight. Then you wrap them carefully in cloth and extinguish the coals. The square stands nearly silent now, lit only by distant windows glowing softly. Walking home through falling snow, you feel both weariness and quiet purpose. Your trade offers no comfort to yourself, yet it brings comfort to many others. Being a medieval dentist in winter means working when few others must, facing cold and fatigue alongside the pain of your patients, and returning each day to a duty that the town depends upon, even if they rarely speak of it aloud. By the time winter begins to loosen its grip, you realize something most people in your town never consider. Tooth pain does not only hurt the body, it changes a person's mood, their temper, even their standing among others. In a small medieval community, where everyone works closely together, a man who cannot eat or sleep properly grows irritable, distracted, slower at his tasks. A woman who winces when speaking may withdraw from conversation. A child with constant ache may cry more easily or avoid play. And quietly, without ceremony, many of these burdens land at your stall. As frost melts and muddy water gathers along the streets, you prepare for another long day. Your tools are worn now, their handles smoothed by years of gripping. The iron shows faint marks where countless teeth have been held and rocked free. You polish them carefully each morning, not for beauty but for reliability. A slipping instrument can cause harm far worse than pain alone. Mid-morning brings a man from a nearby village who has traveled several miles on foot. He has heard of your work and has come because no one in his village pulls teeth properly. He removes his hat and sits stiffly, ashamed of the condition inside his mouth. Several teeth are blackened and one has begun to crumble entirely. He explains that he avoided treatment because he feared the process more than the pain. You nod, having heard this confession many times. Fear is common and you do not blame him. You explain calmly what must be done and begin with the worst tooth first. It takes time. You do not rush him or yourself. Each steady motion of the forceps loosens the root a little more. He breathes heavily but remains still, trusting your slow approach. When at last the tooth comes free, he stares at it as though it were something that had controlled him for months. Relief follows, mixed with disbelief that it is over. You move to a second damaged tooth, repeating the process carefully. By the time you finish, his shoulders have dropped from tension to exhaustion. He thanks you more than once, promising payment after he returns home with livestock to sell. You accept his word because reputation in this time matters more than written agreement. As afternoon light shifts across the square, a different kind of visitor approaches. A young apprentice who works in a noble household. He is anxious not only about pain but about appearance. A visible gap in his front teeth could cost him favor. You examine the cracked tooth and decide extraction cannot be avoided. The removal is swift, and afterward you smooth the neighboring tooth carefully so the gap appears less severe. It is not perfect, but in this age, perfection is rarely expected. The hours continue steadily. You treat swollen gums, remove broken molars, and advise countless rinses of warm salt water. You have seen enough to understand that some habits bring more trouble than others. Those who chew constantly on hard seeds or use their teeth as tools suffer most. Quietly, you advise them to be cautious, though necessity often overrides advice. As evening approaches, the sky clears for the first time in days. Pale sunlight lingers longer than before, hinting at the coming spring. You feel the strain in your hands again, joints stiff from years of gripping metal handles in all seasons. There are no apprentices eager to learn your trade. Few desire a life defined by other people's pain. You understand why. Before packing your stall, one final visitor arrives. A widow who has struggled with aching gums for months but feared treatment. You clean her mouth gently, avoiding extraction, and show her how to rinse with warm water before sleep. When she smiles faintly in thanks, you're reminded that not every day requires force. Sometimes your role is simply to lessen discomfort enough that someone can rest peacefully. You wrap your tools carefully and lift the stall cloth, shaking off dried mud before folding it. The square begins to empty as the church bell rings. People walk home speaking quietly, unaware of how many small pains you have ended today. You follow the same path through narrow streets toward your home, the air no longer biting with cold but still sharp enough to remind you of the long winter behind you. Being a medieval dentist is not a path chosen for comfort or admiration. It is a life built on endurance, steady hands, and the willingness to face what others fear daily. And tomorrow, when the market fills again beneath clearer skies, you will return to your place, iron tools ready, prepared once more to stand between your town and its quiet, relentless pain. With spring now fully returned, the town begins to feel alive again. Windows open, voices carry farther through the streets, and the market square fills from morning until late afternoon. People smile more easily. Yet you quickly notice something familiar. When life grows busy, small pains are ignored again. The cycle repeats every year. During winter, everyone promises they will care for problems sooner next time. But as soon as work resumes, discomfort is pushed aside until it becomes unbearable. You prepare your stall as usual, laying out your tools beneath the mild sunlight. The warmth makes your hands more flexible than during the cold months, but it also brings longer working hours. You no longer close early. Instead, you remain until the last visitor leaves because many cannot come during the day while laboring in fields or workshops. Late morning brings a fisherman from the nearby river. He chews dried fish and hard bread daily, and one of his back teeth has slowly worn down to a sharp edge cutting his tongue. He has endured it for weeks, adjusting how he eats, until finally he can no longer ignore it. You examine the tooth and decide it does not yet need removal. Instead, you file the rough edge carefully, smoothing it until it no longer injures him. He runs his tongue cautiously across it and gives a relieved nod. Sometimes avoiding extraction matters just as much as performing one. Soon after, a blacksmith's apprentice arrives, face tense and eyes tired. He has worked long hours and drank little water, allowing swelling to grow unnoticed. The tooth must be removed. You guide him to sit, steady his shoulders, and begin the slow rocking motion you have practiced for years. Around you, the market continues loudly. Carts creak, traders argue, and children shout. Yet within the small circle around your stall, quiet returns again. Pain commands silence. The tooth releases after steady pressure, and he leans forward, breathing deeply. You give him cloth and instruct him not to return to heavy hammering until bleeding stops. He agrees, though you know work will likely pull him back sooner than advised. Throughout the afternoon, you treat a steady line of people. A merchant with inflamed gums from constant sweet wine. A farmer whose tooth cracked while biting into roasted grain. A woman whose jaw aches not from a single tooth, but from grinding her teeth during sleep. Something you have noticed happens often in those who worry much. You cannot cure every cause, but you relieve what you can. As sunlight lowers, shadows stretch across the square. Your shoulders ache from leaning forward repeatedly, and your fingers feel heavy from gripping iron handles hour after hour. There is no true rest in this profession. Even after you leave the stall, neighbors may knock at your door after dark if pain becomes unbearable. Just as you prepare to close, a hurried knock sounds against the wooden table. A man arrives nearly running, holding his cheek, unable even to speak clearly. He woke with sudden swelling and could not wait until morning. Though tired, you reopen your tools and sit him down. By lantern light, you examine him and remove the infected tooth carefully. When finished, his relief is immediate, and he thanks you repeatedly, apologizing for disturbing you late. You pack your tools slowly afterward, fatigue heavier than earlier. The market is empty now, replaced by quiet evening air. A few candles glow in distant windows while footsteps fade along the narrow streets. Walking home beneath the soft dusk, you reflect that your work never truly follows the town's schedule. Others rest when the day ends, but pain does not respect sunset. Being a medieval dentist means answering need whenever it appears, whether in busy daylight or silent night. You carry iron instruments, but also responsibility, a quiet duty to ease suffering wherever and whenever it finds you. Another season turns quietly, and you begin to understand that your life has been measured not by years, but by faces. You remember them. The baker clutching his jaw at sunrise, the child frightened of a loose tooth, The old carpenter finally able to eat bread again. The traveler relieved enough to continue his road. None of them will record your name in any book, yet your work has shaped their ordinary days more than they will ever realize. You return to the square one final morning in this telling. The sky pale and calm. The market wakes slowly, merchants arranging goods, the smell of bread drifting across the air. Everything looks peaceful. Yet you know beneath that calm, many people carry hidden aches. Tooth pain is a quiet suffering. It rarely shows from a distance, yet it steals sleep, patience, appetite, and conversation. In a medieval town, without medicine, without anesthesia, without understanding of infection, a single bad tooth could weaken a person more than heavy labor. You lay out your familiar instruments again. The iron handles feel almost like extensions of your hands now. Years have taught you exactly how much pressure to apply, how long to wait before rocking again, how to steady someone who trembles. You have learned not from scrolls or masters, but from repetition, memory, and care. Every extraction has been a lesson. Every mistake has stayed with you longer than any success. Your first visitor today is not someone in crisis, but someone returning simply to thank you. An elderly woman whose gums you treated months ago smiles gently and hands you a small loaf of bread. She eats comfortably now, she explains. The relief you gave her was small in action but large in life. Moments like this remind you why the burden has been worth carrying. As the day continues, you perform the same duties again. A loose tooth removed, a swollen gum cleaned, a frightened boy reassured. Nothing dramatic happens. No cheering crowds gather, yet the quiet importance remains. Your trade is not heroic in story, but essential in reality. Without you, pain would linger in every household far longer than anyone could bear. The sun lowers slowly behind the rooftops, light fades across the square, and voices soften as families return home. You clean your tools carefully one last time in warm water, drying each piece with deliberate care before wrapping them in cloth. The brazier glows softly beside you, then dims as you cover it. You look across the emptying market and understand your place in this world. Being a medieval dentist meant long days standing, sore hands, cold mornings, fearful patience, and work that few envied. Yet it also meant restoring sleep to the sleepless, meals to the hungry, and calm to the anxious. You were not loved for the moment of treatment, but remembered for the relief afterward. You lift your bundle of tools and begin the walk home through quiet streets lit by candlelight. Doors close gently. Footsteps fade. Somewhere a bell rings in the distance, marking the end of another ordinary day in a time where ordinary comfort was hard won. And as our slow walk through this past finally comes to rest, the town settles into night, and the square grows still once more. If this calm journey into forgotten history helped you relax, you can gently leave a like. And if you wish to wander more nights through worlds like this, you are always welcome to subscribe and return again. There will always be another quiet street, another distant century, and another life waiting to be softly remembered.